toasty and tasty. It is getting hot. Not hot as balls yet, but getting close. Getting close to it. Look at the Superman lock in my face. Yeah. Stick around as I share some of my cigar adventures and misadventures in this edition of the Dad Smoking Cigars podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Dad Smoking Cigars podcast. As always, I'm your host, Kyle D. Garrett, and the Dad Smoking Cigars podcast is sponsored by Casa Cuevas Cigars, from our casa to yours, and Pariah Cigars. You can see a little, if you're watching on YouTube, I put a little sticker right behind me, Pariah sticker, and just to represent a little bit. You probably can't see it as clearly as I hope you, as I'd like. You're just gonna have to zoom in a little bit if you're able to. But those of you listening on the various podcast platforms, you're just gonna have to trust that it's there. I mean, you can't see it, but you hear me yak about it. But anyways, welcome to another episode, guys. Thanks for tuning in. And it is Friday. The weekend is almost here, and April is already almost over. Holy shit. This happens every year. I mean, and that's no exaggeration, because I just feel like every single time a year starts, you blink twice, figuratively speaking, and next thing you know, you're about halfway through the year, pretty damn close to it. We've already blown through the first quarter, and now we are traipsing into the second rather quickly. It is almost May, and May is a good month for me. May is my birthday month, and it's also my wife's birthday month, and it's also several of my relatives' birthday month. So May is a very exciting time, and on top of that, it's also Mother's Day. So my wife gets double the love and attention that she ordinarily would on any other month. We love her, and we try to make sure she feels appreciated, but it is May where we have to up the ante and make sure she really feels that appreciation, and I just get one day. That's it. I was supposed to be born in June, apparently, according to my doctor, though everybody seems to think that I was born right on time, that they got my conception date wrong, and I was supposed to be born in supposed to be born in May all along. But then again, I have the personality traits of a Gemini, apparently. And I'm technically a Taurus because of when I was born. I was born on May 10th. So, but when I look at the Taurus profile, I don't really have that personality. I don't really have those personality traits. I'm more of a Gemini. And I usually joke saying, well, I was meant to be born in June, so I ended up getting the Gemini personality traits anyway. So, but I digress. My dad was born in June, so he gets both that day, his birthday, and Father's Day, and I'm just stuck somewhere in the middle, kind of, sort of. But anyways, I get one after the other. My birthday month, then Father's Day, so I guess it's really not so bad. I'm not complaining. I'm just wagging my jaw, as I usually do. But truthfully, there's a lot to look forward to. I'm excited about the coming month. Gonna be a lot of fun and cool things going on in May. May is always a busy month. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be it's exciting and maybe a little exhausting. I think that was the word that I was trying to force its way out of my mouth. But it's going to be a good time, and hopefully I will get to smoke a lot of cigars. And speaking of smoking cigars, I am smoking the Pariah cigars, Hecho en las Calles, which, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, that means made in the streets. And I don't know if that's literal, but it kind of paints a picture. The picture that's actually on the band is kind of like a storefront, almost like a strip mall type thing. And there's one part that says, one storefront that says cafeteria, and the other one that says I can't read it. I can't read it. It's too small. My eyes can't read the tiny print. It's also a little dark in this corner. You won't be able to tell because it looks like I got some good light, but that's just my studio light. So I look good, but I can't see shit in front of me. But it is a delicious cigar so far. It's a Habano profile cigar, a Habano wrapper over Olor Dominicana binder, and Dominican, Cameroon, and Pennsylvania fillers. So this is a hell of a blend, and so far it is very tasty, very toasty, slightly sweet flavors. No spice just yet, even though I was told to expect a little spice, but I haven't gotten there yet, but I'm looking forward to that part. Definitely. So as I was sitting down, just kind of contemplating what I was going to talk about this week, I started thinking back. I started thinking back to the beginning of my cigar adventures, as it were, because to be perfectly honest with you, prior to the age of 18, 19 years old, I had no real interest in smoking anything. My grandfather, my grandpa, he died at a very young age. I mean, let me put it this way. My dad is older than his dad was when he passed away. My grandpa passed away at age 58 due to a very long-running cigarette smoking habit. My grandpa would smoke, I don't know how many packs a day, but it was ridiculous how much the man smoked. There were numerous times that we had asked him or straight up told him that he needed to quit. But my grandpa was not a man that you could really sway that easily. You could tell what to do. Definitely, he was his own man. He made his own choices. And unfortunately, one of those choices led to a very early and untimely passing. Definitely long before we were willing to or wanting to say goodbye. I honestly wish he'd been able to stick around for at least as long as my grandmother had lived. My grandmother continued to live until about 2 years ago. She passed away. Interestingly enough, my grandma passed February 23rd of 2021. My grandpa passed February 24th of 1998. So it was just kind of crazy how close that their passings were in terms of the date, and it was one of those things. It was an odd thing that brought us comfort. But looking back on my grandpa and his life, I loved him. He was a wonderful grandpa. He had a very stoic sense of humor. He wasn't a guy that you would hear laughing uproariously or cackling at a joke or something like that. But he was definitely a guy that was fun to be around, and he loved being a grandpa, and I loved having him as my grandpa. But in all truth, his smoking habit, him having smoked for years and years, which led him to getting heart disease and emphysema and all of that stuff that led to the end of his life, I committed to never ever smoking cigarettes. Really smoking anything initially. Because I was like so many others, where it's just like, smoking's bad, and so very Mr. Mackey from South Park, drugs are bad, cigarettes are bad, so I knew I wasn't ever going to smoke cigarettes. I'll be perfectly honest, I was actually tempted after I got out of high school to start smoking cigarettes, because I had never worked around so many people that smoked cigarettes, both in 2 jobs that I worked, a retail job at a music store, and definitely when I started working in the food service industry. First restaurant job I ever started working, almost everybody, and this is not an exaggeration, I would say roughly 95% of the people that I worked with, maybe less, maybe more, all smoked cigarettes. They would all go outside and have their cigarette break, and when I was out there talking with sometimes, I already was familiar with the aroma of cigarettes, and truth be told, I didn't find it unpleasant. It wasn't like one of my most favorite smells in the world, but the aroma of cigarettes sometimes, had a certain je ne sais quoi appeal to it, and there was a couple of times where I was tempted to say, hey, do you mind if I bum a cigarette off you just to try it? But I knew in the back of my mind that if I were to attempt smoking a cigarette, it would not end well. It would be very unpretty, very ugly. I'd probably be hacking, coughing, spitting, possibly throwing up at some point. And I knew that there really was there was no way that I was going to be able to do cigarettes. So I never gave into that temptation, and I never started smoking cigarettes. But looking back into my childhood, not merely my adolescence and when I was stepping into adulthood, there was always a certain appeal that tobacco had for me, because I remember I would be going to my friend Terry's house on a regular basis. We'd spend the night at each other's houses all the time. And I remember I would spend a lot of time at his house, and his dad was a pipe smoker. His dad would smoke his pipe in the house. And so every time I was there, it would smell of just this sweet, sweet tobacco smell. And I loved that smell. I absolutely loved that smell. There were two smells that I really loved as a kid, even though these were two things I wouldn't consume for decades until I was, much older. Smell of coffee and the smell of, pipe tobacco. Not cigarettes so much, but pipe tobacco. Just tobacco in general, like real, actual, natural tobacco. And that was one of my favorite smells from childhood, just at his house. It was the only place I'd ever smell that smell. And I loved it. I loved walking into that house and just kind of breathing in deep and taking in the aroma of the pipes. I never saw his dad smoking the pipes, but I would always smell the aftermath when I walked into the house. And to this day, it's still one of my favorite smells ever. My cigar adventures would start long before I ever started drinking coffee, which I'm not going to get into when I started drinking coffee, but suffice it to say, I drink coffee every fucking day now, and I need coffee every fucking day now because it just helps me along. It helps my brain wake up a little bit, and it's delicious. I love coffee, and that helps me get my day going after I wake up. But when I was around 19, so this was like circa 2003. I've told this story before in other videos and things like that, but when I was about 19, this was back when you could purchase tobacco products at age 18. Now it's 21. But I remember I was hanging out with my dad. It was one of the many weekends I would spend with him after I graduated high school. My mom and my dad would split up, so there'd be different times I'd see my dad, and this was one of the weekends that he was in town, and we were hanging out, me, him, and my brother. And I knew that my dad occasionally would smoke cigars. I don't recall exactly how or when I found this out, but I think I'd asked him about it. I see movies and stuff like that. Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of my favorite action stars, would smoke cigars. Sylvester Stallone, others like them, and it was just there was a fascination that I had regarding cigars, and I found out that my dad would occasionally smoke. Obviously, occasionally is not the right word for how often my dad enjoys cigars. My dad enjoys cigars pretty much every day at this point in time, and I just said, hey, I think I'd like to try a cigar. And he's like, you sure? You want to do that? You serious? I'm like, yeah. I said, I would actually really like to smoke a cigar. And so my dad took me to really the only local cigar shop, like actual cigar shop, not a smoke shop, not, a place where they sell all manner of smoking products. Their vape wasn't a thing then. And it was an actual cigar shop, strictly cigars. And it was a place called Zafuto Cigar Haven in a town called Ontario here in Southern California. You hear Ontario and you think Canada, but there's actually a town called Ontario here in SoCal. And it was near this mall that I would spend a lot of time at as a younger guy. And my dad took me and my brother. Obviously, my brother didn't go inside because he was still a kid. My dad took me in, and I said, what should I start with? And he says, a lot of people start with like a flavored or infused cigar, so why don't we kind of ask the people running the shop what they would recommend, and we'll go from there. And I thought that was a good enough plan. Went in there, and there was this older lady who, probably was about, maybe a little younger, around my grandma's age at the time. You know, she was working behind the counter, and I told her, I said, I'm getting my first cigar. I said, obviously I don't want to smoke something crazy strong, something that's going to make me sick, something that's going to give me a bad headache. So what would you recommend? And I remember she recommended this brand called Kojimar, a brand that is still around today, and they specialize in flavored and infused cigars. And she recommended this one. Now, I can't remember if it was just Kojimar Vanilla or if it was one called the Kojimar Blue Moon, which was a vanilla infused cigar, and it was a sugar tip cigar. So like when you would cut the cap and you would taste the cap, it would just be so damn sweet, but it was delicious. And that was the first cigar that was recommended to me. That was the first cigar I ever smoked, and I was hooked after that. Hooked in that I knew that I would try to enjoy it as much as possible. I didn't smoke very often for years, but that was how I got my start in cigars. Now, like a lot of people, I mean, initially I stuck with the Kojimar cigar for a little bit. That was kind of my cigar of choice. And, I mean, it was really, really tasty, really sweet. And, kind of like my alcohol preferences for a while after turning 21, like, it took me forever to really enjoy beer and some of the more, less frou-frou type drinks, because I drank like Smirnoff Ice and stuff like that. No judgment for anyone who drinks those. They're actually really tasty and very refreshing. But I got made fun of a lot because, I liked the stuff that was tasty, and I hadn't acquired a taste for beer yet. It would be years before I acquired a taste for whiskey. And, same thing with cigars. Initially, I liked the sweeter cigars. I liked the ones that had more of a sweet flavor to them. Whether they were infused or not, it was just one of those things where, like, it made more sense to me at the time. But then I just, I need to branch out a little bit. And so I started smoking mainly Cohibas. I'll be honest with you, because I remember I went... that was the year that Bad Boys 2 came out. And, prior to that, I wasn't paying attention to what brands people were smoking in movies and stuff like that. I just noticed that some of my heroes, action heroes and things like that, they smoke cigars. And I remember in Bad Boys 2, I mean, granted, it was the bad guy smoking them, but it was, the bad guy was a Cuban dude, and they busted out the Cohibas. And anybody who knows what Cohiba really means, it just means Cuba. Cohiba means Cuba. So, that was something I was drawn to. I asked my dad about it, and so I started smoking Cohibas on a piecemeal basis. I never went out and bought like a box of cigars. I wish I had, because they were probably a lot more affordable at the time. But, I would go to the cigar shop, grab myself a Cohiba. Usually that was what I picked out. And I would just enjoy that because, it was popular, and I felt kind of cool smoking a popular brand, and one that was in films, and one that some of the tough guys and badasses in film that I enjoyed would smoke. And I would smoke other ones too, but I never really remembered exactly what I smoked because it was so long ago. But yeah, that was mostly what I smoked, and I would smoke very, very periodically. It wasn't something that I would enjoy regularly. I wish I had, but I was living at home with my mother at the time, and she didn't care for them, which is funny because now she'll actually smoke a cigar with me, but, I digress. So just to fast forward through the years, cigars were a very occasional thing for me. Cigars were not something that I would enjoy all the time, regularly. It was something that I would kind of, do at random. I smoked maybe a handful a year, and it wasn't much. But as years went by, and especially as I spent more and more time at my dad's house and my dad's collection of cigars grew, I began to smoke a lot more. Much to the chagrin of my wife, she really didn't care much for me smoking cigars, especially when we would go hang out with my dad for a Sunday afternoon and stuff like that, and we would hang out on the patio watching a movie or something like that, and he would hand me the one cigar that I would remember smoking the most frequently was an Alec Bradley Prensado, which I love those. Those are still a favorite of mine. And I felt kind of cool smoking them because my dad pointed out that they were in the movie The Kingsman, The Secret Service. And they got to do a bunch of cool shit in that movie and drink a lot of really nice scotch and things like that. And in their car, inside of a little like compartment humidor in the car, you could see Alec Bradley Prensado. And my dad pointed out, he was like, yeah, that's what you're smoking right now. I'm like, that's awesome. Every time I got it associated with the movie, I always felt like I was smoking something good, so I was smoking a good cigar, and that, you know, I should just stick with those. But yeah, the more and more time I spent at my dad's house, I would just start smoking more cigars, and I would start trying different ones and things like that. And you know, my dad had his preferences, and I tended to smoke what he smoked. And that was, again, still an every once in a while thing. Not frequently, not constantly, even though I wanted to smoke all the time. It wasn't something that I would really, truly get to enjoy, I mean, honestly, until I bought my own house. Be in 2018 that we bought the house that I'm currently living in. Cigars were actually kind of a coping mechanism for me. Long story short, and this is in another video that I shot a while ago, and it was the 5th anniversary of what I'm about to mention just this year. But that year was the year that my nephew passed away in an accident. He was only 21. It was an absolutely massive blow to our family. And, you know, only 11 days later, my youngest son will be born, so it was a roller coaster of emotion. And then, you know, just after that, I kind of started taking more solace in cigars, smoking more frequently, not just at my dad's, but at my own house. I had a patio to smoke on now, and it was something that I like to enjoy as often as possible. Started buying more cigars, started, you know, enjoying, you know, whenever I go to see my dad, I would enjoy them more. You know, it was something I wanted to do more and more and more, and that was leading towards what would eventually become this, Dad Smoking Cigars. You know, I saw more cigar YouTubers popping up all over the place, and people who would review cigars and talk about them and things like that, and I wanted to do that as well. My passion was growing, and so that's how this all started, and that began a cigar adventure unlike any other I would ever have in my entire life. That wasn't to say it didn't come with a couple misadventures trying more and more cigars. There were cigars I'd try that just really did not measure up really at all. One in particular that comes to mind. It was a box of cigars my wife bought me because I had just left a job. I had been working for about 11 years. I worked as a pool guy for 11 years. And I could no longer do that job because it was too far to drive, and my youngest was going to school here close to home. So it wasn't practical, it wasn't something that I could really commit to anymore. And as kind of a celebration of transition, my wife bought me this box of cigars. It was a box of, I think, 55 Petite Maduro Corona cigars. And there was only like $40 for this entire box. Thought it was kind of nuts. There were so many in one box, and they came from this company. I can't even remember the name anymore. But it was based out of Florida, and they were mostly machine-made cigars. And they were not hand-rolled. They were not made by hand or anything like that. They were machine-made. And initially, I thought they were really good. I should also note they were also something that Tim, Cigar Show Tim, thought were really good, because as I mentioned in my last episode, Tim and I started Dad Smoking Cigars together, and that was our very first live stream on Instagram, where we smoked the cigars and kind of just hung out and chatted with everyone, and we thought they were pretty good, but we didn't know shit, honestly. We didn't know the cigars were shit. And that, to this day, is the only brand of cigars, and they're no longer around, no longer in business. They were terrible, we would soon find out. And I'm actually going to share a clip from an old, the 1-year anniversary special of Dad Smoking Cigars, when Tim and I were still doing this together. Those of you watching on YouTube, you're going to get to see, you know, a piece of history, and those of you listening on podcasts, it's going to be, you're not going to be able to see it, but you're just going to hear how much we really did not like these cigars. So enjoy this clip. It's pretty hilarious. Just, we had been trying newer cigars, more boutiques, better quality cigars, so when weighing them against those, these cigars had no chance. And check out this clip.
But you got to look at these because
they're
yes. they're Petite Coronas, like Kyle said.
Yes.
But you know that a really high quality, finely crafted cigar always has to come with an open tab like a pack of gum.
Well, let's demonstrate, because as you can see, it actually opens in the middle, and you can easily take off the top and the bottom of the wrapper.
And there is
Easy
a little
peasy.
bit of tinting to the
the wrappers
cellophane.
have become a
They
bit
are well
discolored.
aged.
They are well aged. They have kind of that sweet earthy smell to them. They don't smell like, you know, your usual gas station cigars, but I seriously doubt these are even 2 to 3 steps above that, if that much.
No.
So Tim and I are going to indulge in a little bit of masochism right now for you guys. But I am not getting my hopes up.
That wrapper's terrible.
Son of a... This thing is
Your
like...
foot went nuclear.
Are you actually getting any draw out of that? Oh my gosh.
I'm trying.
Oh, and the taste just got...
I got bitter.
Yeah, we're gonna take a moment to reflect and mourn.
It's gross.
I'm just gonna light it on fire.
Dude, you're wasting your butane.
Sorry, bad cigar etiquette.
Oh my gosh, memories. And yeah, those were the first cigars. Again, the only brand I've ever trashed because they were terrible, and the only brand I literally threw in the trash, which I actually did on a live stream. And some people kind of criticize me for that. I'm like, guys, the brand's no longer in existence. I'm not going to hurt anybody's feelings. These cigars are actually not good at all. So yeah, this is not something, because I really don't like to bash brands. I don't. If I don't like a cigar, or if I don't really think it's that good, I just won't ever smoke it again. Then again, but somebody else might really enjoy them, and so I'm not going to bash that brand just in case it's somebody else's favorite, because then I'm going to look like an asshole, and I don't want to be that guy. So it's not something I ever do. I don't bash brands. If you like that cigar and I don't, good for you. I'm glad you enjoy it. I don't enjoy it. You know, whatever that brand is. And so, yeah, that was the one and only brand that I ever bashed and trashed. And to this day, I think that it will remain so. And I mean, unless I come upon a cigar that is absolutely terrible. But even then, I'm going to keep that to myself. But it would be that year. That would be the year where I, myself and Tim and, you know, started really stepping into the world of boutique cigars. And it would be brands like Casa Cuevas, 1502 Cigars, United Cigars, and other brands that I would try, and I would start to find out that there were just these amazing smaller brands that had a fantastic product. And when I again weighed them against some of the more popular brands, it's not like the popular brands just sucked horribly. No, that's not it at all. But there was a difference in quality. There was a difference in just the finished product, the flavor, the construction, and things like that I did not find in some of the bigger brands. The heritage brands, so to speak, are just really popular brands. Boutique brands were starting to just explode. And that definitely was true in my own cigar adventure, because it was just, I was mind blown thinking, like, you know, it's not like I'm thinking all these cigars I smoked before, these are just terrible compared to these. But it was one of those things where the quality just stands out so much more than, you know, some of the more popular brands. Because the thing about popular brands, and I brought this up, including like Cuban cigars, you know, the real heritage brands, and some of the more popular brands that are out there, is they are cranked out like really fast, really heavy. And unfortunately, when that occurs, the quality can suffer. Oliva is a brand that is extremely popular, and don't get me wrong, Oliva makes fantastic cigars. But there's a guy I used to know, a guy named Scott. He used to be really big on YouTube. He'd do his little cigar. He called his Instagram handle Mini Cigar Review, and sadly we haven't seen him around for a long time. I don't know what's going on with him. But I remember watching a live stream of his where he's talking about, because he had smoked Oliva so frequently all the time. It was one of his it was one of his favorite brands, and he smoked them often enough to notice that there was, in some of the cigars, not all of them, but in certain cigars, there was a dip in quality. Now, does that mean that Oliva was striking out, not making good products? No, Oliva is still a fantastic brand, and I know plenty of people, including my buddies Frankie and Miguel, who adore Oliva. They love that brand. They love smoking them as often as possible. You know, there are just certain times, I think, in certain seasons, where depending on the popularity of a brand, they're cranking them out so fast and so hard, they're not really able to take the time to, do draw testing, taste testing, testing their blends, and really seeing how they fare and how much people enjoy them. They just go with what they normally do. They put out the product, people try it, and if you're, for those who are really paying attention, they notice it's not at all what it used to be. And so, it's unfortunate, because especially when you have a brand as popular as Oliva, or even brands like Cohiba, Montecristo, and Romeo y Julieta, and things like that, I've noticed personally, Cohiba, Montecristo, I used to love those cigars, and don't get me wrong, Montecristo in particular, they make some pretty good cigars. I had bad luck with Montecristo for a while. There was just I did not have good experiences with the cigars I smoked. The worst one was when my in-laws brought me back a Montecristo from Cuba. I actually brought it back from Cuba. It was a Montecristo Open Master. And that thing was packed so tight, rolled and packed so tight, I could barely get a wisp of smoke out of it. I tried for 15 minutes. I didn't even make it 1/16 through the goddamn cigar. And I had a headache, and I was frustrated. That is the very first time, I think the first and only real time, where I smoked it, or tried to smoke it, and it was mostly still intact, barely consumed, barely lit and burned, and I just had to give up on it. It made me so friggin' sad, because I was looking forward to it. My in-laws had gone to Cuba and brought me back some Cuban cigars. Interestingly enough, that was the last good Cohiba that I had. They brought me back a Cohiba. I couldn't tell you which one it was, because the labels all look the same, and you don't see a ton of difference in the look. But it was the typical band and everything like that, and it was a really excellent cigar. That Montecristo was terrible. In terms of local made Cohibas, Cohibas that are mainly sold in the United States, because you can't sell Cuban cigars here, the quality has suffered. The last time I had a Cohiba Red Dot, I was not impressed. But again, they're extremely popular, and they are cranked out just at an insane pace, and the quality suffers. The same is extremely true for Cuban cigars. I have smoked many Cuban cigars, and I would say only a handful of them have been very, very good and excellent, and I enjoyed them, because Cuban cigars have just a distinct flavor. You know it's a Cuban cigar when you smoke it, and pretty much, I won't say all Cuban cigars taste the same, but there is a distinctness to their flavor where you know you're smoking a Cuban cigar. And unfortunately, the quality on Cuban cigars has suffered, because it's one of their major exports. They are rolling them and cranking them out at a ridiculous pace, just so that way they can get them out there for people to purchase and consume. And unfortunately, a number of them, they really don't measure up. And the quality of the construction, of the flavor. My dad bought me a box of Petite Montecristo No. 2s. Montecristo No. 2 is an excellent cigar. I have had it a number of times. In fact, I think that is the Cuban cigar I've smoked the most. But I would say only about a handful out of that box of 25 were actually good. The first one I smoked was excellent. The rest of them were hit and miss all the way through. I think I still have a couple left. Maybe. I don't know. Who knows if I'll ever smoke them, or when I'll smoke them. They've just been kind of sitting and mellowing and chilling in my humidor, if I still have them. And it was just unfortunate and kind of sad. And it's one of those things where being able to immerse myself into the boutique cigar community, I have really truly discovered just what good cigars are. And they're made by people who just have such a passion for cigars and the community. I mean, I know a handful of people here in the United States who their passion for cigars became so much so they're like, I want to create my own. I want to create my own brand of cigars and just see what I can come up with. And some of these people, like my friend Brandon Ovison of Apostate Cigars, and his friend Kendrick, they both own Apostate together, and they have made it an excellent product. I'm an ambassador for them here in California. And then, of course, there is my buddy Eric from Black Star Line Cigars. I mean, that guy is a blending. In my mind, he's a blending genius because he spends so much time thinking about blends, and it's just his passion. He loves doing it. I mean, he comes up with blends in his head, writes them down like an author or poet writes down their stuff in their journal. Like, just they write down a little bit here and there, and then they end up coming up with something brilliant afterwards. And I become more associated and connected with people like that. And these people are fucking awesome, and they create an amazing product. And it's one of those things that, I mean, I'm not going to say that anybody can do it, but if you truly want to, if your passion for cigars is that great that you want to create your own, I mean, really anything is possible. And these folks have proven that. And of course, coming back around to my two sponsors, Casa Cuevas and Pariah Cigars. The Cuevas family, they've had it in their blood for literal, like, over a century, 5 generations of people in the Cuevas family, from Spain all the way to Cuba, the Dominican, and here in the United States. And they have been involved in tobacco for so long, and creating cigars for over 3 decades. And it has evolved into their family brand, and they have never once disappointed in their product. They pour so much love and passion into it. It is truly a family affair, and they create excellent cigars. And then Frankie Miguel, Pariah Cigars, the Bakersfield gentlemen, they were guys like me who they've worked in cigar shops, and they were involved in the cigar industry and community just by being connected with various other brands and influencers and personalities. And they fell in love. They loved it so much they wanted to create their own brand as well. And I can't tell you how excited I was when I found out that they did. And it has just grown, and they have created an amazing product. And this one right here, the Hecho en las Calles, this is so tasty. And I'm not just saying that because of their support and their willingness to sponsor me and partner with me. This one is excellent. I'm really enjoying it, and my hat's off to those guys, because again, they're just another example of people whose passion has grown so much for cigars that they created their own, and they did it very well. And it is a success. It's a winner, and I'm grateful to be a part of that. And it's in all this, and there's so many other brands I can mention. I mean, you've heard me mention them in past videos, no doubt. I could go on and on, but this is all part of the adventure, all part of just this amazing, fantastic ride I've been able to be on, and it ain't over yet, and it just keeps going. And yeah, I'm continuously excited for the future, and I love getting to be able to sit in here and create more and talk more about cigars. But this adventure is unlike any other, and I am grateful that I get to do this, be a part of so many cool things, and get to smoke excellent cigars. It really doesn't get any better than this. It really doesn't. But I say that, and for some reason I feel like something's gonna I'm gonna be shown pretty sooner than later that it's only gonna get better. And yeah, so this is one hell of an adventure. And I hope that as you smoke more cigars and try different cigars and more brands and things like that, that you really truly feel like and treat it as an adventure, because that's what it should be. Cigars create memories. Cigars create situations where people come together, celebrate, and have fun and enjoy. And it creates community. It creates relationships. It creates family. And that is something that has never, I mean, it continues to amaze me, hasn't ceased to amaze me. Just look forward to all the memories I'll continue to make and have with all these people that I'm connected with. It's fantastic, it's awesome, and I love it, and I'm grateful to be a part of it. So those of you watching on YouTube, I hope that you will share examples of your cigar adventure with me, or anywhere else that you are listening to or watching this. Maybe shoot me an email, send me a message, share with me your cigar adventure. I would love to know what your experiences are with cigars and what kind of cigars you enjoy and appreciate. I would love to start a conversation because I love talking to people about just their various cigars that they enjoy. It always starts great conversation. It's always a wonderful time. I think that's a good place to put a pin in it for now, guys. I am so grateful that you decided to tune in. I hope you enjoyed this episode and hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit more about, my cigar adventure and all the different cigars I've tried and how I came to this point of my, my taste and palate and things like that. It really has changed over the years in ways that just continue to be wonderful and amazing, and it just generates just this fantastic experience. I'm looking forward to trying even more, and hopefully with some of you guys. So hopefully at some point we can get together, sit down, and have a cigar, because that would be awesome. But that's it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. As always, I'm your host, Kyle D. Garrett. This has been the Dad Smoking Cigars podcast. I hope you guys are staying healthy and safe, keeping it smoky as always, and of course, I will catch you guys in the next one.